I always believed I could control everything. Contracts, people, destinies. I learned early that feelings are weaknesses that come at a high cost. That Christmas night in Monaco, I wanted only silence, an elegant hotel, a glass of champagne, no questions. Then she appeared. She didn't walk in seeking attention. She didn't need to. The whole world knew who she was, but there, no one knew who she was, not even me, and maybe that was the mistake. Because in that instant, I felt something that had no place in my life. It wasn't desire, it was recognition, as if destiny had looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Now you're going to lose control." I arrived in Monaco to disappear for a few days. In Brazil, everyone knew who I was. The surname I carried always came before my name. The empire I ran never left me alone. That place was different. There, no one knew me, and that was exactly why I chose to be there on Christmas. The hotel where I was staying, elegant, old, excessively illuminated, seemed designed for people who needed to pretend they were fine. The main hall was full, yet the silence was strange, an expensive silence, the kind that hides stories behind crystal glasses and polite smiles. In the background, a piano played softly, slow, melancholic notes, as if someone knew exactly what I was feeling. I sat alone, a glass of champagne, my phone far from the table. For the first time in months, I didn't want to be found. That's when I felt it. I didn't see her first. I felt her, a different presence, as if the air itself had shifted. When I lifted my gaze, she was there. She didn't enter like someone who wanted to be noticed. She entered like someone who was used to being watched and tired of it. She walked slowly, accompanied by two people who spoke too quietly. A serene face, impeccable posture, a kind of beauty that doesn't ask for attention. It simply exists. I didn't know who she was, and maybe that's why I looked longer than I should have. She saw me too, not immediately. It was a brief exchange of glances, almost a mistake, but enough for something inside me to break. We didn't smile. We didn't look away quickly. We just held that moment 1 second longer, and it was in that second that I realized some people enter your life before you even allow them to. She sat a few tables away, in profile, delicate hands resting on her lap, her gaze lost in some distant thought, alone, even though she wasn't. I should have gone back to my glass, to my world, to my safety, but for the first time in a very long time, I couldn't. There was something about her that unsettled me. It wasn't curiosity, it was familiarity, as if I were looking at someone who carried the same kind of loneliness I had been hiding for years. That night, I still didn't know her name. I didn't know her story. I didn't know the whole world knew her. I only knew one thing: that woman shouldn't matter so much to me, but she already did, and without realizing it, that Christmas night in Monaco, destiny had just opened a door I had spent my entire life keeping locked. The piano continued. The notes echoed through the hall as if marking the time of something that didn't yet have a name. I tried to ignore her. I tried to pretend that our exchanged glance meant nothing. But the body knows before reason does. When I noticed, she was already closer. She wasn't walking toward me. She simply passed by slowly, like someone with no hurry, or like someone who knows exactly where she's going. Her perfume lingered in the air for a few seconds. Subtle, unexpected. "May I?" Her voice was low and polite, with a slight accent. She gestured toward the chair in front of me. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because I feared what that simple gesture might begin. I nodded. She sat carefully, keeping a respectful distance, attentive eyes, curious, but restrained. "The piano," she said, looking around the hall. "It's beautiful." I smiled softly. It was the first simple thing someone had said to me in a long time. "It is," I replied. "It suits the place." She agreed in silence. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke, and still, it wasn't uncomfortable. There was something comforting in that pause, as if silence were a language we both understood. "Are you running away from Christmas?" she asked. I looked at my glass of champagne before answering. "Maybe," she smiled. A small smile, almost shy, nothing rehearsed. That's when I realized she wasn't playing anyone. "I'm Helena," I said. She took a second longer before replying. "Ji-Yoon." The name sounded soft, foreign, too beautiful to forget. The piano changed its rhythm, slower, deeper, and then I felt it again. It didn't come from her. It came from somewhere behind us, a gaze. I didn't need to turn around to know. The feeling of being watched was familiar to me. In Brazil, I lived with it every day, but there, it was different, more attentive, more interested. Ji-Yoon noticed too. Her body tensed slightly, almost imperceptibly, but I saw it. She looked away for a brief moment, then back at me. "Maybe we should go somewhere else," she said, still quietly. "Maybe," I answered. I stood first. She followed. As we walked through the hall, I felt that gaze again, following us, as if someone were recording every step, every closeness. When we reached the exit, I glanced over my shoulder. I saw only a shadow, a presence too discreet to ignore. When I turned back to Ji-Yoon, she was watching me closely. "You felt it too, didn't you?" I asked. She nodded. "Some stories begin like this," she said, "when someone looks too soon." I didn't know what that meant. I only knew that the night was no longer simple, and that this conversation had just placed us inside something neither of us was ready to admit. The piano kept playing, and for the first time, silence no longer felt safe. We left the hall without hurry. The corridor was narrower, less illuminated. Golden lights reflected on the walls, as if that place had been designed to keep secrets. The sound of the piano faded, but it was still there, faint, almost like a reminder that nothing in that place was accidental. We walked side by side, without touching. The closeness was enough for me to feel the warmth of her body, and still, we kept a careful space between us. "Do you also prefer places like this?" Ji-Yoon asked, breaking the silence. "Places where no one looks too closely." "I do," I replied. "Here, people observe less." She smiled softly. "Most of the time, I'm the reason for the attention." The way she said it held no vanity, only exhaustion. We stopped in front of a large window. Outside, Monaco shimmered like an unreal set, lights reflecting on the sea, cold, distance. "Sometimes, I wish I could be invisible," she said, almost to herself. I looked at her carefully. Invisibility can be lonely too. She held my gaze a moment longer than necessary, as if deciding whether she could trust that answer. "You speak like someone who knows that." "I do." Silence returned, but it wasn't empty. Suddenly I felt it again. The same discomfort, the same chill along the back of my neck. Someone was there, not close enough to be seen, not far enough to be ignored. Ji-Yoon stepped a little closer to me. Instinctively, her arm almost brushed mine. "He's still watching us," she said quietly. I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. "Let's keep walking," I said, without showing anything. We continued down the corridor as if nothing were wrong. Low laughter, relaxed posture, but inside I was calculating. Every reflection in the mirrors, every shadow on the walls. In one of them, I saw it, a silhouette standing still, too distant, too motionless. When I turned my head, there was no one there. "Maybe it's just our imagination," Ji-Yoon said, trying to sound light. "Maybe," but we both knew it wasn't. We stopped in a small side lounge, almost empty. An old sofa, dim lighting. There, silence felt like protection. She sat first. I sat beside her, keeping a minimal distance, enough to feel safe, not enough to be indifferent. "I don't usually trust strangers," she said. "Neither do I." She took a deep breath. "But somehow, trusting you feels less dangerous." I looked at her. "Some choices are dangerous precisely because they make sense." She smiled, but her eyes still carried caution. And in that moment, I understood. That night wasn't only about an encounter, nor just about two women recognizing each other in silence. There was something else, something watching, waiting. And any wrong step could turn that beginning into a risk neither of us was ready to take. The side lounge felt suspended in time. The light was too dim to be comfortable, yet too bright to hide emotions. Ji-Yoon held my gaze for a few seconds longer than before, not like someone staring, but like someone trying to understand. "You don't seem to be here for work," she said, breaking the silence. "I'm not. And you?" She hesitated. It was the first time I saw something close inside her. "Neither am I." The answer was simple, but incomplete. The piano could still be heard in the distance, loose notes, as if someone were playing without looking at the sheet music. "Then what brought you here?" I asked. She looked away for a moment, watched her own reflection in the dark glass of the window. "A place where no one would recognize me." "And you?" I smiled softly. "The same reason." Our eyes met again, and stayed there. There was something in that silence that wasn't accidental. It was careful, as if we both knew that certain truths, if spoken too early, break what is still being born. She leaned forward slightly, didn't invade my space, just close enough for me to notice the change in her breathing. "You don't speak much," she said. "I learned that too many words reveal things I'm not ready to expose yet. And what are you trying to hide?" I held her gaze. "What happens when people expect too much from you?" She didn't answer, but something in her eyes softened, as if she understood without needing details. That's when I felt it again. It wasn't imagination. The observer was closer. This time, I saw it, not the face, the intention. A man standing near the corridor entrance, well-dressed, far too attentive to be casual. He pretended to look at his phone, but his eyes lifted often, always in our direction. Ji-Yoon noticed my tension. "He's back?" she murmured. I nodded. "You're used to this," she said, more observation than question. "Yes, but today, it's not just about me." She took a deep breath. "It never is about just one person." She was right. The man stepped back a few paces, but he didn't leave, as if he were simply marking territory. "Maybe I should go," Ji-Yoon said, without moving. "Maybe." Neither of us stood up. Seconds stretched. The space between us closed without us noticing. I could feel the warmth of her hand close to mine. We didn't touch, but the gesture hovered in the air. "If I leave now," she said, "I'll regret it." I looked straight at her. "Some things are worth regretting." She smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a brave one. And in that instant, I understood. Neither of us was ready to say who we truly were. But we both knew that this meeting had already crossed the line of casual, and while someone watched us from a distance, something between us grew in silence, something that didn't need a name, not yet. I went back to the hall alone. The piano was still playing. The notes felt wrong now, out of rhythm, as if the musician had lost the tempo along with me. I picked up the forgotten glass on the table. The champagne was already warm. I didn't drink it. I went up to my room without looking at anyone. The elevator felt unbearably slow. Each floor repeated her gaze inside my mind. When the door closed behind me, silence finally fell. I took off my coat, left my shoes on the floor, walked toward the bed as if I were exhausted from something that never happened. I lay down. The white ceiling turned into a screen. Everything replayed before my eyes like a poorly edited film. The way she walked, the pause before saying her name, the attentive gaze, the hand that almost touched mine and pulled back. I replayed the moment she said, "I need to go," the way she didn't ask, as if she already knew that some things aren't chosen. My chest tightened. It wasn't longing. It was anticipation. Anticipation of something that hadn't even begun, and already hurt as if it had ended. I turned my face into the pillow, closed my eyes, but her face stayed. That night, I didn't lose someone. I lost the control I always believed I had over myself, and lying there, alone, in a room too expensive to feel welcoming, I understood. Some encounters aren't meant to stay. They come to disrupt, and she had just done that to me without even telling me who she was. I woke up before the alarm. For a few seconds, I didn't remember where I was. The room still dark, the silence heavy. Then I remembered. The hotel, the night, the look. I turned onto my side, hoping her image had stayed in yesterday. It hadn't. I got up slowly, opened the curtain just enough to let the light in. Monaco was waking up. I wasn't. I made coffee and didn't drink it. My phone stayed far from my hand, as if touching it meant admitting something had changed. I turned on the television just to fill the emptiness. The volume was low. Images passed without my attention, until something made my body freeze. The face. I didn't need to hear the name. She was there, on the screen, impeccable, serene, exactly like the night before, and completely different. The caption beneath the image said what my eyes still tried to deny. A South Korean actress, celebrated, internationally recognized in Monaco for an exclusive year-end event. The coffee went completely cold. I sat on the edge of the bed, unable to look away. Every detail made sense too late. The way she moved, her careful silence, the exhaustion behind the perfect posture, the confidence that didn't feel like a choice, the observer, the urgency, the farewell, everything. I brought my hand to my face, not in surprise, in impact. I hadn't been drawn to a stranger. I had unknowingly crossed paths with someone who belonged to a world even farther away than mine. And yet, she had sat across from me. She had spoken to me as if I were simply someone. The television stayed on, now showing images of her smiling at cameras. A trained smile, controlled, not the same smile. I turned it off. Silence returned, heavier than before. That morning I understood two things at the same time. That night could never have been simple, and despite that, it had been real. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling like the night before. But now it wasn't confusion. It was awareness. I knew who she was, and I knew exactly what that meant. The impossible had a name, a face, and a weight I still didn't know if I could carry. I don't know what she thought after she left. I don't know if she got into that car in silence. I don't know if she looked out the window. I don't know if, for even a second, she thought of me. But that morning, while her face was still far too vivid in my memory, I caught myself imagining. I imagined that she, too, had felt the weight of that farewell, that the silence on the way had been louder than any conversation, that at some point, she had wished she wasn't who she was, not an actress, not an image, but just someone ordinary, sitting across from me that night. Maybe I'm projecting. Maybe it's just my way of surviving the absence. The truth is, I couldn't go through the day as if nothing had happened. I worked, signed documents, answered emails I barely read. Everything felt smaller after her. I was in my room, in the more secluded residential complex of the hotel, where I usually stayed when I needed distance. She was probably in a suite at the main hotel, where the events took place. The separation was intentional. I knew she needed privacy, and so did I. That afternoon, I closed my laptop and stared at my own reflection in the window glass. The woman looking back at me didn't seem like someone used to losing control. I picked up my phone, not to call, not to look for contact, just to confirm what I had already known since morning. Her name appeared far too easily, her face far too recognizable, the world around her far too big. There it was, the real distance between us. Languages, continents, expectations, everything told me to stop. But I was never good at pretending something hadn't affected me. I turned off the phone and took a deep breath. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a clear path, just one uncomfortable certainty. I wasn't ready to accept that this story had ended before it even began, and maybe that was exactly what made it dangerous. The idea of never seeing her face again, of never hearing her voice, made my chest tighten in a way I hadn't expected. I knew she was there, on the other side of the hotel, and despite all the physical distance between us, it felt as if she was still so close, exactly where I couldn't stop feeling her. That afternoon, the hotel felt even larger than it truly was. The corridors, the halls, every detail of the residential complex seemed to hold possibilities I couldn't yet name. I decided to go up to the rooftop of the main hotel, where the most elegant and popular bar for guests was located. The place offered a perfect view of the sunset, and I needed to lose myself in something, anything, that wasn't her face. I chose a more secluded table. I didn't want to look like I was waiting, but somehow my eyes searched for Ji-Yoon anyway. I ordered a drink, and while watching the horizon painted in shades of orange and gold, I tried not to think about the night before. I failed. My heart raced with every suspicious movement among the other guests. That was when I saw her. Ji-Yoon was talking to a couple near the bar, elegant, light, unhurried. She laughed softly, leaning slightly toward them, gesturing naturally. She didn't notice me right away, but I couldn't look away. When she lifted her eyes to admire the sunset, our gazes met. "Breathe, Helena," I thought, trying to calm my own body. It was impossible, and then something unlikely happened. Ji-Yoon walked directly toward my table. Each step shortened the distance that reason was trying to keep. She stopped in front of me, a soft, almost defiant smile, as if she knew I wouldn't be able to escape what was about to happen. "May I sit?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. I nodded, unable to speak right away. She settled into the chair across from me, keeping only the minimum distance necessary for me to feel her warmth without touching her. My drink remained untouched. My eyes never left her. The bar was filled with low voices and discreet laughter. A soft piano in the background accompanied the golden light pouring through the panoramic windows. But for me, the world had narrowed to her, and the restrained distance between us. "The view from here is beautiful," she said, without looking away. "Not as much as this moment," I replied, almost without thinking. She leaned slightly forward, keeping her eyes on mine. It wasn't the smile of a celebrity. It wasn't the pose of someone used to being admired. It was the smile of someone who truly saw me, as if she were recognizing every part of me I had hidden until then. A comfortable silence settled between us, a silence that carried everything we didn't need to say. Long looks, breathing almost in sync, the feeling that the entire world had stopped. She discreetly lifted her hand, just to adjust something in her hair. For a moment, she almost touched my arm, and that moment was enough for everything from the day before. All the contained desire, all the fear of reason, to surface at once. "You always seem to appear in places where I shouldn't find you," I murmured, trying to break the silence without ruining the magic of the moment. She tilted her head, her gaze intense. She didn't answer with words, but with an almost imperceptible smile. A smile that said, "I know exactly who you are, and I'm not trying to run." The sun slowly said goodbye. Golden light reflected on the glass of the bar, illuminating her eyes in a way that took my breath away. And in that moment, I realized that this encounter wasn't accidental, but it didn't need to be explained either. The bar, the sunset, the piano in the background, the crowd, all of it disappeared. There were only the two of us, with a silence that screamed louder than any words. And then, as if the world wanted to remind us of reality, someone passed near the table, an observer, perhaps. But nothing was strong enough to break that perfect, intense, and completely ours moment. The bar was beginning to empty, but the golden light of the sunset still colored everything around us, reflecting on the glass and on the faces of the last guests. Ji-Yoon and I remained facing each other, my hands holding a drink I barely touched. It was as if the entire world had narrowed down to that single moment. "It's incredible how the light changes everything, isn't it?" she said, looking toward the horizon. "Yes," I replied, trying to control the heart that was beating faster than I wanted to admit. "It feels like even the whole bar becomes quieter." She smiled softly, and for the first time, I realized she wasn't the actress everyone admired. She was Ji-Yoon, someone real, human, right there in front of me. "You," she began hesitantly, as if afraid of stepping into my story. "Who are you really?" The question hit me like a cool breeze in the middle of summer. For a moment, I wanted to look away, but silence was no longer enough. She deserved an answer. "I'm Helena Brandão," I said, choosing each word carefully. "I work at my family's company in Brazil. It's an agribusiness empire." I didn't want to say more. I didn't need to. It was enough to spark curiosity in her eyes. She leaned in slightly, absorbing every detail. "An empire? In Brazil?" she murmured, almost surprised, almost fascinated. "Yes," I replied, keeping my voice steady while feeling every heartbeat. "But today, here, I'm none of that. Just someone who wants to enjoy the sunset." Silence settled between us again, but now it was filled with quiet intimacy, a mutual recognition that something important had been shared. "And so," she said, looking directly into my eyes, "do you always hide behind all of that, or did you just decide to show yourself today?" I smiled softly, trying to balance vulnerability with composure. "I think, just today," I admitted, letting slip more than I intended. "Just today, I decided that maybe it was time to simply be myself." She laughed quietly, and that laugh, so light, so genuine, relaxed me more than any public encounter ever had. Exchanged glances, breathing almost in sync, small gestures. The world seemed to have disappeared. The soft piano in the background, the golden light coming through the windows, the entire bar reduced to just the two of us. And then, almost imperceptibly, someone passed near the table. Perhaps the couple she had been talking to earlier, perhaps another guest. Ji-Yoon lifted her eyes, noticing the movement, and for a moment, the real world returned. She looked at me again, with that smile that said more than words ever could. "This isn't over. It's only just begun." And in that instant, I realized that the night still held secrets, emotions, and encounters that no one could predict. The bar was almost empty now. The last traces of the sunset had faded, and the soft ambient lights illuminated everything with a calm that almost felt unreal. The tension between us, silent and heavy with meaning, still lingered in the air. The looks we exchanged said more than words ever could. It felt as if we were in a separate universe, a private space where everything made sense, where our souls were recognizing each other somehow. I was almost allowing myself to believe that maybe it was possible, that this moment, with her, could be more than just a casual encounter. But reality, as always, arrived abruptly. Ji-Yoon looked back toward the horizon, and for a second, the silence became palpable. I could hear my own breathing, and the soft sound of the piano still playing in the background, but nothing could ease the growing anxiety taking over me. Suddenly, a man entered my field of vision, a security guard, staring directly at us. He walked toward us with a sense of urgency, and as he passed by, made a discreet nod in Ji-Yoon's direction. "We need to leave," he said quietly but firmly, only for her to hear. Ji-Yoon immediately straightened in her chair, and for a brief moment, I saw something else. A mix of concern and something harder to name passed through her eyes. I unconsciously took a deep breath, trying not to show how affected I was, but she didn't seem surprised. It was as if she already knew this moment had an expiration date. She looked at me, and in that look, the tension between us shifted into something new. "Helena," she said my name softly, and something in her voice made my chest tighten. Before I could respond, Ji-Yoon's security guard helped her up from the chair. That was when I heard the sound of a camera, a sharp click, followed by a series of flashes that briefly lit up the space. I turned my head and saw a paparazzi who had appeared out of nowhere, probably trying to capture something that shouldn't be seen. His eyes were fixed on Ji-Yoon, almost completely ignoring my presence, focused only on her. The feeling of being watched made my heart race, but to my surprise, Ji-Yoon remained calm. She stepped closer to me, her gaze intense, as if she wanted to make it clear that this moment was more than just an escape. "We need to exchange numbers," she said, with a seriousness she had never shown before. I didn't hesitate. I took out my phone and handed it to her, and in silence, she typed in the number. I knew it wasn't just about simple contact. It was a bond being formed, a mutual recognition, something deeper that neither of us could avoid. She finished and handed the phone back to me. When she looked at me, there was a softness in her eyes, as if she already knew we would see each other again, but with greater intensity, something waiting for us beyond that moment. "I hope you understand, Helena," she said, with an enigmatic smile. "We can't continue like this for long." Those words hit me like a shock, but at the same time, I couldn't help but smile back. We knew there was no turning back. Our fate was already set, and whatever path awaited us, we had already taken the first step. Ji-Yoon stood up and, accompanied by her security guard, began to walk away. I stayed there, watching the scene, still feeling the flashes echo in my mind. The paparazzi didn't leave us alone, but he had no idea that the real story was just about to begin, and that it would never be reduced to simple images captured on a single night. The sound of the flashes was still echoing in my mind when Ji-Yoon disappeared through the door, accompanied by her security guard. The bar, now almost empty, felt like an irrelevant space. All I could think about was her, the smile, the gaze, the way she made me feel seen, even while being someone so famous and distant. For a moment, I hesitated. It was risky, I knew. Following her would mean stepping into her world, a world filled with cameras, curious eyes, and external expectations. But something inside me refused to stay still. I took a deep breath and stood up. The floor felt solid, but every step I took carried the weight of uncertainty. When I left the bar, I still caught her reflection in the glass near the entrance. Ji-Yoon was talking to her security guard, but from time to time her eyes searched the corridor. Maybe for me. I walked unnoticed, keeping enough distance not to alarm her. Every movement was calculated, every step silent, as if we were playing a quiet game of approach and restraint. "Breathe, Helena," I whispered to myself. "Just observe." And then, when she stopped for a moment to look at the illuminated city, our eyes met again. That instant lasted an eternity. No words were spoken, but everything was clear. She knew I was there, and I knew she felt the same. When she finally walked away, she left behind a sense of emptiness, but also of promise, a silent invitation to discover more, to dare to step into her world, even knowing the risk. On the way back to my room, I looked at my phone. I thought about sending a message, but silence felt more appropriate at that moment. The tension between the desire to get closer and the need to respect her space made every second more intense. And in that moment, I realized something had changed. It was no longer just curiosity, or fascination, or attraction. It was the certainty that somehow our stories were about to intertwine in an irreversible way. As I walked through the quiet hotel corridors, the thought that wouldn't leave my mind was clear. This night is over, but what began has only just begun. I arrived at my room with my heart still racing, the city lights reflecting through the windows. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it for a moment, taking a deep breath. Every detail of that night felt engraved in my memory. Her gaze, the restrained smile, the subtle gestures, even the presence of the paparazzi watching us from a distance. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I picked up my phone. My hand trembled slightly, and I hesitated for a moment, remembering that she was still under security protection and surrounded by curious eyes. But the desire to get closer was stronger than any caution. Carefully, I typed a message. "It was good to see you today. I hope we can talk more calmly tomorrow. H." I sent it, without expecting an immediate reply. The feeling of vulnerability hit me like a wave. I was opening space for her in my world, without knowing whether she wanted to step inside. While I waited, my eyes wandered across the city. The sunset had given way to the nightlights of Monaco, and everything felt different, quiet, almost conspiring in our favor. It didn't take long for my phone to vibrate. It was a message from Ji-Yoon. "I hope so too. H. Let's meet tomorrow." J. My chest filled with a mix of joy and anticipation. It was just a small exchange of words, but somehow it carried more intensity than any formal conversation ever could. I leaned back against the headboard, closing my eyes. I remembered the bar, the piano, the almost accidental touch of her hand. Each memory carried with it a silent promise, a certainty that this meeting wasn't casual, and that something greater was about to begin. And then, as if the universe confirmed what I already felt, my thoughts turned to the next night. Tomorrow, seeing Ji-Yoon again won't be just a meeting. It will be the chance to truly know her. The room was silent, but my heart was screaming. And in that silence, I knew there was no turning back. The hotel library was unlike any other place I had ever visited. It was quiet, almost magical, with tall shelves and the scent of old books lingering in the air. The soft lighting gave the space an intimacy that seemed to deepen with every step I took. I knew Ji-Yoon was there. I knew that somehow she was also searching for a bit of peace amid the chaos of her responsibilities. After exchanging messages, she suggested meeting somewhere quieter. No bar, no public spaces. Just the two of us, among books and silence. When I entered the library, I found her leaning against one of the shelves, her eyes fixed on a book she clearly wasn't reading. She seemed distant, but I knew her mind was present, waiting. For a moment, I watched her in silence. A famous actress, yet there, in that space, she was simply a woman alone, searching for something deeper, something real. I took a deep breath and approached slowly. My presence seemed to catch her attention, and when she looked up and saw me, a discreet, inviting smile appeared on her face. The tension between us hadn't disappeared. If anything, it felt more tangible now, as if it were about to pull us together. "Helena." Her voice was soft, yet charged with something I couldn't quite name. "I knew you'd come," I replied without thinking. The words came out more naturally than I expected. She gave a small smile. Not an actress's smile, but a woman's, and I almost lost my breath realizing that something was unfolding between us, something that could no longer be ignored. She set the book aside, and it was as if time slowed down. We stood there, facing each other in silence, as though the world around us had vanished. What existed between us now was real, and simply looking at one another filled the space in a way I had never experienced before. The silence seemed to draw us even closer. I could hear my breathing, the subtle sound of my accelerated heartbeat. She probably could too, but neither of us spoke. I began, but my voice failed. She was so close, and the tension between us was unbearable. Then, without warning, Ji-Yoon stepped forward, her hand gently touching my face with the tips of her fingers. The gesture was simple, but the softness of her touch made me lose my balance. She tilted her head slightly, almost like a silent question. That movement, calm and certain, made me close my eyes for a brief moment, and then, without thinking, without hesitation, I leaned in. The first kiss wasn't a shock. It was soft, exploratory, full of meaning. Her lips met mine with a gentleness that seemed to stretch beyond that instant. The contact was brief, yet so intense it felt as though time had expanded. When we pulled apart, our gazes remained locked, still deeply connected. There was no space left for words, only a silent understanding. Nothing was said, but we both knew the boundary between who we had been until then and who we could become had been broken. Everything was about to change, yet fear remained. The awareness that Ji-Yoon's public life could interfere with everything. She looked at me, her breathing still slightly uneven, and murmured softly, "I didn't think it would be like this, but this is real, isn't it?" I smiled without meaning to. "Real," I replied, my voice filled with both certainty and doubt. "This is just the beginning, Ji-Yoon," I whispered, feeling the weight of my own words. We looked at each other, and for a brief moment, the outside world felt impossibly distant. But, as always, reality was waiting. And soon, we would have to face everything this meant. The silence wrapped around us, and for the first time, I gathered the courage. I gently took her hand, feeling the soft warmth crossing the space between us. Ji-Yoon led me to a nearby sofa, away from curious eyes, and we sat side by side. This kiss was different, more intense, more urgent, as if every lost moment needed to be reclaimed at once. Our lips met firmly, exploring, affirming, unhurried in separating. My heart raced, and everything around us seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of us and the quiet electricity flowing between our bodies. When we finally pulled away, she rested her forehead lightly against mine, breathing deeply. "Helena," she said, her voice emotional but steady, "I can't stay here any longer. I have to follow my schedule." My hand was still holding hers, and I felt a sharp desire to prolong that moment. "But can we have dinner tonight?" she asked, a playful spark in her eyes. My room, farther away," I replied, trying to control the anxiety bubbling inside me. She smiled, a smile filled with both promise and tension. Then it settled. "But now, I have to go." We stood up, and she walked away slowly, still maintaining the connection of our eyes. The echo of that moment lingered in the air, a void that could only be filled by the next chance, the next conversation, the next meeting. With my heart still racing, I remained seated, feeling the warmth of her hand and the intensity of our kiss. I knew the night still held far more than words could explain. The room was far too quiet for a night like that. The city glowed outside, distant, as if it knew something inside was about to change. Then I heard the knock on the door. 3 soft knocks, firm, controlled. My heart answered before I did. When I opened it, Ji-Yoon was there, not as an actress, not as a star, but as someone who had crossed her own courage to stand before me. For a moment, we stood still. The corridor separated us from the real world. "I thought about leaving twice," she confessed, her voice low. "And yet you came," I replied. She nodded. I closed the door. The sound of the lock wasn't loud, but it was final. I moved closer slowly, as if afraid of breaking something fragile. She breathed deeply, as though every second demanded a choice. "You're trembling," I murmured. "Because I've never felt this before," she answered, "and because I want to stay." There was no room left for doubt. We kissed, not with haste, with surrender. A kiss that began contained and grew, as if our bodies were learning each other's rhythm together. My hands found her face, then her waist. She held on to me as if the ground might disappear. When we pulled apart, our breathing was uneven. "Helena," she said, as if saying my name for the first time. "I'm here." I touched the fabric of her dress, feeling its texture beneath my fingers. "May I?" She didn't answer with words. She simply closed her eyes. I slowly pulled down the zipper. The dress slid from her shoulders as if it had been waiting for that gesture. There was no exposure, only trust. The soft light traced her silhouette with care. She watched me, vulnerable and strong at the same time. "I've never let anyone see me like this," she confessed. "I know," I replied. "I see you." We kissed again, deeper now, more aware. Every touch was a question. Every answer came as a sigh, a closer step, a silent surrender. We lay down together. There was no rush, no urgency. There was discovery. My hands moved over her skin like someone learning a new map. She touched me carefully, as if afraid of making a mistake, and yet everything felt right. Between kisses and breath, I asked, almost without a voice, "Ji-Yoon, have you ever loved someone like this?" She rested her forehead against mine. "Never," she said, "but now I know I can." The world disappeared. There was no need for words. Our bodies understood each other in silence, in rhythm, in presence. We made love as people meeting for the first time, with respect, curiosity, and an intensity that needed no explanation. When everything finally calmed, we stayed there, entwined, breathing together. She fell asleep against me, as if that were the safest place in the world. And in that stillness, heavy with meaning, I knew it hadn't been just a night. It had been a beginning. The night was no longer deep when I felt Ji-Yoon move slowly in my arms. She woke up gently, as if returning from a distant place, and for a few seconds she simply breathed, trying to understand where she was. The city light filtered softly through the curtains, drawing calm shadows across the room. Everything was too peaceful to be just a dream. She lifted her face, still sleepy, and looked at me. "Helena," she murmured, as if saying my name kept her there. I pulled her a little closer. "I'm here." We stayed in silence for a while, just watching each other. There was no awkwardness. There was intimacy. "I don't usually allow myself this," she said, her voice low and sincere. "What?" I asked, gently running my fingers through her hair. "Staying, feeling, not running away right after." Her words didn't ask for an immediate answer. They asked for understanding. "I didn't plan any of this either," I replied, "but I don't regret it." She nodded, as if that confirmed something inside her. After a few moments, her expression changed slightly. Not sadness, awareness. "When do you go back to Brazil?" she asked. I took a deep breath before answering. "In 2 days." She absorbed the information in silence. "I leave tomorrow," she said then. "At the end of the day, I'm going to Korea. I'm going to see my parents." The word tomorrow hovered between us, not as a threat, but as reality. "And after that?" I asked, unable to hide my curiosity. "After that, I continue my schedule, filming, commitments." She paused. "But I don't want to pretend this was just one night." She looked at me seriously before asking, "When will we be able to meet again?" I smiled softly, not because it was simple, but because I wanted it to be possible. "We'll have to check our schedules," I answered. "But for me, as soon as possible." The relief in her eyes was immediate. "Then let's try," she said, resting her forehead against mine. "For real." Later, we ordered dinner to the room. We ate, sitting on the bed, talking without hurry, laughing at small things, sharing stories we didn't usually tell anyone. The night continued, making love, exchanging touches, discovering each other without urgency. And when the day came, we were still there. We spent the rest of that night and the following day together, inside that room, as if the world had been put on pause. We knew the goodbye would come, but in that moment, we chose to stay. Because some connections don't need big promises. They only need presence. And that, we both had. We woke up with the morning light crossing the room, but neither of us was in a hurry. The clock existed, I knew that, but we decided to ignore it for a few hours. Ji-Yoon was lying beside me, still wrapped in that comfortable silence that only comes after true intimacy. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. We had breakfast in the room, sitting near the window, watching the movement of the hotel below. She laughed at small things, commented on ordinary details, the croissant that came wrong, the distant music in the hallway, as if she were trying to turn the ordinary into memory, and I let her, because I knew. We spent the day there, as if that space were a refuge outside of time. We talked about everything and nothing, about travel, about choices we made too early, about who we were when no one was watching. "Here," she said at one point, lightly touching my hand. "I can breathe differently." That stayed with me. As the afternoon went on, the air changed. Not abruptly, it was subtle, like when the sky starts to darken before you admit the day is ending. Her phone vibrated on the table. Ji-Yoon looked at the screen, then she looked at me. I didn't need to ask. "It's time," she said, almost in a whisper. Helping her get ready was harder than I expected. Every gesture felt too heavy. Every piece of clothing she put on was another step away from me. When she reached the door, she stopped, took a deep breath. "I don't know when I'll be able to come back," she said, "but I know I don't want this to stay here." I walked toward her. "Then it doesn't," I replied. "We carry it with us." The hug was long, the kind of hug that doesn't ask for strength, it asks for presence. The kiss was restrained, but full of everything we didn't dare to promise. Before leaving, she rested her forehead against mine. "Don't forget me," she said. "There's no way I could," I answered. I stood there, still, as the door closed. No tears, no drama, just the certainty that something important had begun, even without knowing when or if it would continue. That night the room felt bigger, quieter, but not empty, because some presences remain, even after departure. And Ji-Yoon, she stayed. The room felt bigger after Ji-Yoon left, or maybe it was just emptier. I spent the rest of the day there, even though I knew I should go out. The bed still held her warmth, the pillow, the light scent that insisted on staying. Everything felt suspended, as if time had decided to provoke me. The hotel remained the same, luxurious, silent, impeccable, but something about it had changed for me. I went down to the cafe in the late afternoon. People spoke softly, glasses clinked, the piano echoed in the background. The same piano, the same melody that had accompanied us the night everything began. I sat alone, not for lack of company, but because that was how I needed to be. For the first time in a long while, no one was looking for me. No meetings, no urgent decisions, no empire calling me back. And still, I was not at peace. I picked up my phone, a message from her, sent hours earlier. "I'm already at the airport." I read it more than once. I didn't reply right away, not out of disinterest, but because some words require courage. When I finally wrote back, it was simple. "Have a good trip. I wanted to say so much more, but we were still learning how to exist in each other's lives. In the days that followed, Monaco lost some of its shine. The sunset was still beautiful, the sea was still blue, but everything felt distant. I walked through the hotel corridors like someone moving through a memory. I passed by the library, the rooftop bar. I avoided the lounge where I had first seen her. Each space carried a possibility that was no longer there. I became Helena Brando again, the businesswoman, the heiress, the woman who commands, decides, controls, meetings by call, reports on the tablet, objective conversations, as I had always done. But something slipped through. Between one commitment and another, my thoughts returned to her, to the way she spoke softly, to the way she looked at me without asking for anything, to the comfortable silence that existed when we were together. Ji-Yoon didn't occupy my thoughts like a storm. It was subtler than that. She remained. The messages continued, short, spaced out by the time difference. I arrived. I'm home. My parents asked about the trip. I replied to all of them, always. Sometimes hours later, sometimes immediately. Neither of us mentioned goodbye, nor longing out loud, but it was there, implicit, in every restrained word. On the last night before my return to Brazil, I went back to the room early. I opened the window, let the cold air in. I lay alone on the bed, staring at the ceiling, as I had done so many times in my life. But that time, something was different. I wasn't thinking about the future of the company, nor the next decisions, nor what was expected of me. I was thinking about someone who wasn't part of my plans, and yet had already changed all of them. Maybe we didn't know when we would see each other again. Maybe the real world would try to place us on opposite sides. But there was something that neither distance, nor time, nor reason could erase. Some people pass, others stay. Ji-Yoon had stayed. Returning to Brazil was supposed to mean resuming, control, normality. But from the moment the plane touched down in São Paulo, something in me remained, somewhere else. The disembarkation was silent. Waiting cars, a discreet team, no unnecessary questions. Hours later, already on my private jet heading to Cuiabá, I watched the city disappear beneath the clouds. The comfort was the same as always. Soft leather, absolute silence. A world designed so I would never have to miss anything. And still, I did. I closed my eyes for a few moments, and against my will, Monaco returned. The sunset, the piano, the silence between the two of us. I pushed the thought away, like closing a door that insists on opening. The company remained impeccable. Aligned reports, positive results, productive meetings. Everyone treated me as they always had, with respect, caution, and expectation. The board was pleased with your short absence, one of the directors said during the first meeting, but your parents asked to speak with you as soon as possible. I wasn't surprised. They always asked. At dinner that night, the subject came without detours. Helena, you're past the stage of postponing certain decisions, my father said, his voice too calm to be casual. The company needs stability, my mother added, and so do you. Stability. It was always that word. Are you talking about marriage? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. They exchanged a quick look, rehearsed. We're talking about the future, my father replied. I nodded, polite, as I always did, but something inside me closed. In the days that followed, I immersed myself in work, short trips, signatures, endless phone calls. Everything worked, everything moved forward, and yet something was wrong. It was on an ordinary afternoon, between commitments, that I felt the first real discomfort. An assistant commented, almost casually, "Monaco must be beautiful this time of year." I lifted my eyes slowly. "What did you say?" She looked confused for a second. "Monaco. Christmas there is famous, isn't it?" She smiled. "I saw some photos going around." "Photos? What photos?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Nothing important," she replied quickly. "A sunset, a hotel, elegant people." I nodded, returned to the tablet, but something didn't fit. I hadn't posted anything. I hadn't been officially photographed. My stay had been discreet, and yet, someone knew. That night, alone in my room, I opened my phone, scrolled without hurry, until I found it. A distant image, light grain, nothing explicit, the rooftop bar, the golden sunset, and, in an almost imperceptible corner, a reflection in the glass, two silhouettes. My heart slowed, not with calm, but with alert. It wasn't enough for a scandal, but it was enough to prove one thing. Someone was watching. I closed the phone, walked to the window. Cuiabá slept outside, warm and silent, so far from everything I had lived. For the first time since returning, I understood clearly. What began in Monaco had not stayed there, and somehow the real world had already started to move, even at a distance, even in silence. And I still didn't know who was watching. I was still standing by the window when my phone vibrated. I didn't look right away. Some messages carried too much weight to be read without preparation. When I finally turned the screen over, I saw her name, Ji-Yoon. I opened it. "Helena, I need you to trust me right now. My heart reacted before reason. I kept reading. For a while, it might be better if you don't reply to my messages. I froze. The city outside remained the same. The room, silent, but something had shifted. This isn't about you, nor about what happened. The words were chosen with excessive care, like someone walking on glass. Just give me a little time. I reread every line, trying to find what wasn't being said. And that was exactly where the warning lived. She didn't explain. She didn't apologize. She didn't make promises. It was a simple request, and yet loaded with protection. I sat on the edge of the bed. The phone rested in my hand like a fragile object. I wanted to reply. I wanted to ask questions. I wanted to say that I had seen the photo, that something felt wrong to me too, but I understood. Ji-Yoon never said more than necessary, and in that moment, what was necessary was silence. I typed a single word, understood. Before I could rethink it, I sent it. The reply didn't come. Not that night, not the next day. And strangely, I didn't feel rejected. I felt preserved. I returned to my routine with a new kind of caution. Fewer messages, less exposure, fewer traces. I avoided mentioning Monaco, avoided memories in public, avoided even saying her name out loud. But at night, when everything slowed down, the warning returned. Not as fear, but as certainty. Ji-Yoon was protecting herself, and by doing so, she was protecting me too. The silence between us was not empty. It was strategic, and somewhere in the world, I knew she was watching something I couldn't see yet. The silence lasted 3 days. 3 days without messages, without signs, without any trace of her. I learned to fill the time with quick decisions and short sentences. Meetings started and ended as usual. The people around me believed everything was under control. I let them believe it. On the morning of the 4th day, the warning took shape. It didn't come from Ji-Yoon. It came from the world. A notification appeared while I was signing documents in the office. Nothing urgent, nothing alarming, just a link. I opened it without thinking. The image appeared on the screen before any text. A golden sunset, an elegant bar, tall glass reflecting light. I recognized it immediately. The rooftop, the same place, the same hour. The photo didn't show faces clearly. There was no touch, no gesture that could be pointed to as proof. But there was closeness. 2 figures sitting across from each other, a slight lean of bodies, an attention impossible to fake. It was enough. I scrolled down. Comments were beginning to appear. Polite speculation, questions disguised as curiosity. She wasn't alone. Interesting angle. Who's the other one? I closed the link. The problem wasn't what the image showed. It was when it appeared. The photo wasn't recent. It was precise, chosen. Someone had waited for the right moment. I took a deep breath. For the first time since Monaco, I didn't feel just discomfort. I felt intention. I returned to the image in my mind. I remembered the reflection in the glass, the casual comment from the assistant, Ji-Yoon's request for silence. It wasn't a coincidence. Someone saw us. Someone kept it. Someone decided to use it. And this wasn't just about public curiosity. There was strategy there. I turned off the tablet, placed my hands on the desk. My life had always been observed, but never like this. Not as a silent game, not with pieces moving without my knowledge. And in that moment, I understood something with uncomfortable clarity. Ji-Yoon knew, maybe not everything, but enough to ask for silence. I stood up, walked to the office window. The city moved on, indifferent. But I was no longer just living a story. I was inside a dispute that didn't yet have a name. And someone, somewhere, had just made the first move. My phone vibrated in the early hours of the morning. With the sound low, I glanced at the screen. It was a notification. Her name, Ji-Yoon. This time, something felt different. Helena, we need to talk. I didn't dare reply right away. The silence was heavy. The pressure of everything that had been happening gathered like dark clouds. The photo that had appeared on my screen days earlier felt like a seed, spreading, taking root. It's about the image. The word cut through the air. I know. I was direct. Silence. The company knows, don't they? The question came without warning. The truth was, I already knew my world was cracking. But hearing Ji-Yoon acknowledge it, that she knew too, felt like confirming a pain that had been hidden all along. Yes, they know, but not the way you think. Her tone was cautious, and I could feel the weight of everything she wasn't saying. What are you planning to do? I spoke without thinking, more out of impulse than strategy. There was a pause. I heard her take a deep breath on the other end. Nothing. I can't do anything. Everything is already in motion. She didn't say more, but the tension on the line was unmistakable. I knew what she meant. Nothing could be changed now. The piece was already moving. The next morning, an email from the board arrived with an attachment, the photo. The subject line read, Public Image Outlook and External Repercussions. I nodded to myself. What could not be said was now visible, and as always, the future would depend on what each of us chose to hide or reveal. An empire doesn't shout, it summons. The next morning, I sat at the long conference table as I had my entire life. The same chairs, the same faces, the same silent expectations. This time, though, something had shifted. The The legal director spoke first. "We need to talk about exposure," he said, opening a folder. "Not legal. Institutional." The word echoed. Institutional had always meant control. The image was there, enlarged, marked, analyzed. "There's nothing explicit," he continued, "but there is narrative, and narratives grow when they aren't guided, as if feelings were something that could be managed." "And what exactly are you suggesting?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. A brief exchange of glances followed. "Stability," my father said, seated across from me. "A clear image, a predictable path." "Predictable. A marriage," my mother added, without hesitation. I took a deep breath. It wasn't a surprise. It was old pressure, now armed with opportunity. "My personal life is not a strategic agenda," I replied. "When you are the face of all this," my father said calmly, "it becomes one." I stood slowly. "I built this empire so decisions wouldn't be made out of fear," I said. "I won't start now." The silence that followed was heavy, not with disapproval, with calculation. They knew. I wasn't asking for permission. I was choosing. On the other side of the world, Ji-Yoon was facing her own crossing. I learned about it later, in short messages, careful ones. The agency had called, an emergency meeting, schedules revised, image repositioned. "They want me to smile differently," she said in a brief call, "to be seen with the right people, in the right places." She didn't ask if I understood. She knew I did. "And what did you say?" I asked. There was a pause. "That I need time." Time was something neither of us had in abundance. Still, it was all we asked for. "I don't want to become a symbol that erases what I felt," she continued. "But I also can't destroy everything I've built." I closed my eyes. Neither can I. Two women on different continents. Two impeccable trajectories. And the same silent question: how far can we go without losing ourselves? That night, I sat alone in my office. City lights reflected against the glass. My reflection looked the same as always, but I knew something had shifted forever. Choosing wasn't breaking away. It was owning it. I didn't announce anything. I didn't confront the world. I didn't give speeches. I simply made it clear, where it mattered, that my life would not be a bargaining chip. Ji-Yoon, on her side of the world, did the same. She didn't explain. She didn't deny. She didn't perform. She remained, and so did I. Maybe the world would still try to bend us. Maybe new images would appear, new pressures, new silent games. But in that moment, something essential had been decided. We didn't choose ease. We chose integrity. Two powerful women, on opposite sides of the same fear. And for the first time, we didn't run from it. After the choice came silence, not the imposed kind, but the kind that settles when everything is still rearranging inside. The days moved forward with almost mechanical precision. Meetings, signatures, international calls. I had learned not to look for her in every pause. Learned, not overcome. It was on an ordinary morning, in the middle of a stack of documents, that the invitation arrived. A discreet envelope, thick paper, no exaggerated logo. An international economic forum. A gathering of leaders, investors, and cultural representatives. 3 days, another continent. I flipped through the material without expectation, until I saw it. The official program, guest of honor, familiar names, and then, among them, Ji-Yoon. I didn't need to read it twice. My body recognized it before my mind did. The invitation slipped lightly from my fingers onto the desk. There she was, not as a memory, not as a distant possibility, but as a concrete presence, scheduled, unavoidable. My heart accelerated, not with simple joy, with alertness. This wasn't a private meeting. It was a stage, press, cameras, attentive observers, everything we had decided to avoid. Reason reacted first. I could decline, send someone in my place, keep the choice intact. But there was something about that invitation that didn't feel like coincidence. It was too soon, too precise. Someone knew I would say yes, or wanted to see if I would dare to say no. I rested my hands on the desk, took a deep breath. I thought of Ji-Yoon, of the silence we chose, of the calculated distance, and with uncomfortable clarity I realized the world was calling us into the same space again. Not to unite us, but to test us. I picked up the pen, signed the confirmation of attendance, because some choices aren't undone, they only deepen. And in that moment, I understood. The real game was only just beginning. The theater was larger than I expected. Calculated lighting, cameras positioned with surgical precision, every detail designed to be seen and remembered. I sat in the reserved row for honorees, feeling the quiet weight of the invitation I had accepted myself. I didn't look for her, but I knew that at some point, our worlds would cross. The announcement came without warning. And now, for the presentation of tonight's main award, we invite to the stage one of the greatest cultural references of our time. Ji-Yoon's name echoed through the hall. The applause was immediate, rehearsed, almost reverent. She emerged into the light as if she had been born there, confident, impeccable, every step measured. A discreet, elegant dress, no excess, her hair simply styled, her expression serene. professional, distant. For a second, I struggled to recognize the woman walking toward the center of the stage. Not because she had completely changed, but because I had learned something new: control. Ji-Yoon didn't look for me in the audience. Or if she did, she didn't let it show. Her speech was brief, precise, free of unnecessary emotion. When my name was announced, my body reacted before my mind. I stood, feeling dozens of eyes follow my every movement. I stepped onto the stage. That was when our eyes met. There was no surprise, no smile, only recognition. She held the award firmly, steady hands, no hesitation. "It is an honor to present this recognition," she said, her voice clear and perfectly audible, "to a woman whose trajectory redefines leadership on a global scale." Measured words, no opening. I stepped closer. The distance between us was minimal, and yet insurmountable. When she handed me the award, her fingers touched mine for a moment, too brief to be noticed by any camera, but long enough for everything to return. There were no words beyond protocol, no intimate smile, only that look, contained, steady, unreadable. I stepped off the stage under applause, and only then did I understand. Ji-Yoon wasn't cold, nor indifferent. She had learned to hide better, and there, on that illuminated stage, in front of everyone, I realized with almost painful clarity, the reunion hadn't brought us closer. It had raised the stakes, and the game was now public. The applause ended, the lights adjusted, the event continued as if nothing had happened. But I knew something had shifted in the air. I stepped down from the stage, maintaining the posture expected of me, a controlled smile, steady steps, the award in my hands like a symbol of victory that, in that moment, meant very little. She returned to the area reserved for special guests, not close to me, not far enough to disappear. The distance was exact. We sat on opposite sides of the same space, separated by tables, flowers, glasses, people important enough not to notice what truly mattered. We didn't look at each other right away. That was the first move of the game. The conversations around me continued in low tones, names, numbers, predictable praise, but my attention followed a different rhythm, a minimal gesture. Ji-Yoon crossing her legs with excessive calm, her hand resting on the arm of the chair, her gaze fixed on the stage, too focused. She seemed aware of everything, including me. I waited. When I finally lifted my eyes, she was already watching me. She didn't look away. She held my gaze with a serenity I didn't recognize in the woman who had kissed me in the silent library of Monaco. There was no exposed desire there. There was strategy. I tilted my head slightly, an almost imperceptible greeting. She responded with a minimal movement of her lips, nothing that could be photographed. Everything that could be felt. The silence between us was deafening. It spoke of interrupted nights, of messages never sent, of choices made without applause. And still, there was something new. Awareness. We were no longer two women trying to find each other. We were two women trying not to be deciphered. I observed the surroundings more carefully. Security guards too attentive. Phones positioned with calculated carelessness. Conversations that stopped when someone passed nearby. It wasn't paranoia. It was reading the room. Ji-Yoon noticed at the same instant. She shifted her position slightly, as if adjusting her field of vision. And then, for the first time, her eyes weren't on me. They were behind me. I followed her gaze. A man near the side of the hall pretended to talk, but never let go of his phone. The perfect angle, too discreet to be amateur. I looked back at her. Ji-Yoon didn't react, didn't warn me, didn't show anything. But in that brief exchange of looks, something became clear between us. We were not the only ones playing. The question was no longer whether we were being watched. It was by whom, and perhaps more dangerously, who believed they were in control. My phone vibrated once. I didn't pick it up immediately. Not there, not now. I kept talking to the person in front of me, nodding, smiling at the right moments, as if my body hadn't recognized the signal before my mind had. Ji-Yoon didn't move, didn't look in my direction, didn't show anything. That was what confirmed it. When I finally slid the phone into my palm, I saw the notification on the locked screen. No full name, just the contact saved with care. The message had 2 words. Not here. That was all. No explanation, no request, no apparent urgency. But everything in that sentence was urgent. I lifted my eyes instantly. Ji-Yoon remained still, her gaze fixed on the stage, as if absorbed in the speech of someone irrelevant. Impeccable posture, absolute control. She didn't need to look at me to know I had read it. The man with the phone was still there, disguising it worse now. 1 second longer than necessary. A click, too, contained to be accidental. My stomach tightened. It wasn't press curiosity. It wasn't coincidence. It was surveillance. I put the phone away with the same rehearsed naturalness I had used my entire life to close difficult deals. I took a deep breath, crossed my legs. Across the hall, Ji-Yoon finally moved. She stood with elegance, exchanged a few quick words with a woman beside her, and smiled at someone approaching. Everything looked normal, too normal. Before disappearing among the guests, she made a minimal gesture, almost imperceptible, adjusting the bracelet on her wrist. The same gesture she had made that night in Monaco, seconds before kissing me. A code. Not here, not now, but not over. And for the first time since I returned to Brazil, I understood. This wasn't just about the two of us. It was about who was trying to tell our story before we even knew it. And I needed to decide, quickly, whether I would simply react or play as well. The event ended the way everything ends when no one is allowed to show anything. Calculated applause, final smiles, vague promises. Ji-Yoon was one of the first to leave the hall. She didn't say goodbye to me. She didn't need to. I stayed a few more minutes, the exact amount of time not to raise suspicion. I greeted people I didn't hear, answered questions I didn't register. My mind was elsewhere. When I left the building, night had already claimed the city. I got into the car with a sensation of being watched. Not by someone specific, but by an entire system that had learned to pay too much attention. The driver asked which hotel. I answered automatically. The ride was silent. My phone vibrated when the car stopped at a red light. A message. Ji-Yoon, Helena, the event is over. Each of us went to our hotel. Come meet me. Enter through the back. My suite is 67. I read it twice, then a third time. There were no emojis, no emotional tone, just instructions. My heart accelerated, not from fear, but from recognition. She was in control, and that meant something bigger was in motion. Change the destination, I told the driver. I'm making a stop first. I offered no explanation. Ji-Yoon's hotel was even more discreet than mine. Clean facade, low lighting, security elegant enough not to draw attention. I got out alone. I entered through the back, just as she asked. A side corridor, silent, with thick carpet that swallowed every sound. No curious glances, no visible cameras, which worried me more than it reassured me. The elevator took only seconds, but each floor felt like a reminder of everything that could go wrong. 60, 61, 62. When the doors opened on the 67th floor, the hallway was empty. Her suite was at the end. Soft light leaked from beneath the door. I stopped in front of it for a moment. I took a deep breath, knocked twice, short, controlled. The door opened almost immediately. Ji-Yoon stood there. No stage makeup, no rehearsed smile, no distance. Her gaze crossed through me before any word could exist. Come in, she said quietly. I crossed the threshold knowing that, in that moment, I wasn't just entering a suite. I was entering a territory where neither of us could pretend we didn't know what was at stake, and the door closed behind me, in absolute silence. The kiss still echoed in me when silence returned to fill the suite. Not an empty silence. A silence loaded with everything we didn't dare say out loud. Ji-Yoon rested her forehead against mine. Her eyes closed for a moment, as if regaining composure. My hand still rested on her waist, not out of boldness, but out of the need for grounding. Stay, she said softly. Not as an invitation, as a decision. The night unfolded without hurry. At some point, the lights were turned off. The curtains remained closed. The world stayed far enough away not to reach us. We slept together. We woke up together. Between one moment and the next, there was surrender. Not narrated, but felt. Slow gestures. Touches that didn't ask permission because consent was already there. Presence. Nothing there was excessive. Everything was real. Later, lying side by side, the sheets still holding the warmth of what we had shared, Ji-Yoon remained silent for a time too long to be casual. My parents want me to get married, I said, staring at the ceiling. The words came out without dramatic weight, just tired. Not for love, I continued. For stability, for image, for succession. Ji-Yoon turned her face toward me. Do they believe that solves everything? They believe it solves anything they don't know how to control. She took a deep breath before speaking. With me, they don't talk about marriage. They talk about contracts, brands, expectations. She paused. My managers say my personal life needs to be neutral, invisible, convenient. I looked at her. And what you feel never enters that equation. Ji-Yoon gave a faint smile, a smile without humor. Feelings are considered risk. Silence wrapped around us again, heavier now. I lightly traced my fingers over her hand, intertwining our fingers. Then maybe that's exactly what we are, I murmured. A risk. She closed her eyes. A risk I can no longer pretend doesn't exist. I moved a little closer, not to kiss her, not to ask for anything more, just to be there. Whatever comes next, I said. It wasn't just desire. Ji-Yoon opened her eyes and looked at me with a calm intensity, almost too mature for that moment. No, she agreed. It was a choice. We stayed that way until exhaustion claimed us again. Two bodies at rest, two minds on alert, two hearts aware that that night would solve nothing, but would change everything. Morning arrived without asking permission. Light cut through the heavy curtains of the suite, revealing a world that looked the same, but wasn't. Ji-Yoon was still asleep beside me when my phone began to vibrate. then hers, and then again. The screens lit up on their own, as if someone were insisting on reminding us who we were outside that room. Ji-Yoon opened her eyes slowly, confused for a second. When she noticed the phones, she didn't need to ask anything. "It's already everywhere," she said. I picked up my phone. One scroll was enough. Photos of us at the event, videos from the stage, captured glances, micro gestures enlarged. Was it staged? Did they already know each other? How long has this been going on? Friendship, or something more? Nothing explicit. Everything sufficient. Ji-Yoon sat up on the bed, rubbing her face. "They know how to observe," she murmured, "and they know how to suggest." Her phone rang again. A familiar name, then another, and another. Mine wouldn't stop. Advisors, family, IW people who never called that early. We got up without hurry. We put on simple clothes, almost too ordinary for people occupying headlines. We went down to breakfast like two people trying to be invisible. The dining room was too quiet. We sat across from each other. Coffee was served. Neither of us touched the cup right away. "Looks like the bubble burst," I commented. Ji-Yoon gave a sideways smile without humor, or it began. Her phone vibrated again. She looked at the screen a second longer than before. "They're asking for an official statement," she said. "Just clarifications." "It's never just," I replied. She locked the screen. Then, with a calm gesture, turned the phone off. I looked at mine, did the same. The silence that followed wasn't tense. It was chosen. Ji-Yoon took a deep breath. "Today, I just wanted the world not to come in," she said. I reached across the table. She took my hand. "Then it doesn't," I replied. "Not today." We had breakfast slowly. We talked about small things, the view, the weather, nothing that could be used against us. Outside, the world speculated, created stories, built versions. There, inside that brief space, we did something else. We disconnected, and we continued the day together, aware that that simple gesture, choosing to stay, was perhaps the boldest of all, because the world had returned, and we still didn't know how it would react to what it had seen. We returned to the suite in silence, not the uncomfortable silence, the kind that demands explanations, but the silence of those who already understand too much. The door closed behind us, and for a few seconds I stood still, feeling the weight of what was about to begin, and what would need to wait. Ji-Yoon walked toward the window. Morning light touched her face in a serene, almost deceptive way, as if the world outside wasn't trying to swallow us whole. She was the first to speak. "Helena," my name came out firm, without doubt, without excessive care. "What happened between us was not a consequence of the event," she said, still facing away. "It was a choice, and choices don't disappear just because they become public." I approached slowly. "I know," I replied. She turned around, her gaze direct, without character. There was no actress there, just a woman. "So, we're not going to pretend," she continued. "Not today, not later. We're going to date." It wasn't a question. It wasn't an agreement. It was mutual recognition. My chest tightened, not from fear but from truth. "Even with all of this?" I asked. "Press, contracts, family, expectations." Ji-Yoon nodded slowly. "Especially because of it." She stepped closer, took my hands. "But we need to be smart," she said. "If we try to live this now, the way they want to see it, they'll turn what's ours into narrative." I took a deep breath. "Then comes the hard part," I murmured. "The distance," she completed. "Not between us, between what we feel and what we show." I rested my forehead against hers, closed my eyes for a moment. "It's strange," I confessed, "to commit and at the same time have to leave." "It's not leaving," she replied. "It's sustaining." We stayed there for a few seconds that felt too long to be just seconds. When I knew I had to go, my body was the first to resist. I gathered my things slowly. Every gesture felt too definitive. Ji-Yoon watched me in silence, as if she wanted to memorize something she already knew she would miss. I stopped in front of her, unsure of what to say. She didn't wait for words. Ji-Yoon held my face with both hands and kissed me. It wasn't rushed, nor restrained. It was long, deep, the kind that carries farewell and promise in the same gesture. When we pulled apart, she drew me into a firm, lingering embrace, as if she wanted to imprint my presence into her own body. I held her tight, feeling her heart beat too fast for someone who claimed to be in control. "Don't let go," I whispered. "I won't," she replied, "even when I'm not here." I kissed her cheek, her forehead, finally her lips again, softer, like a seal. I stepped away with effort. Before opening the door, I looked back. Ji-Yoon was there, whole, still, watching, not sad, determined. I left the suite with the uncomfortable and comforting certainty that this wasn't an ending. It was an interval. And sometimes, it's in the interval that the most important stories learn how to breathe. I landed in São Paulo with my body still living in another time zone. I didn't stay. A few hours later, I was already on my private plane, heading to Cuiabá. The pilot said something about the weather, about the landing time. I nodded without truly listening. Brazil received me in layers. First the big city, then the center of everything I had built. When I landed, the empire was intact. scheduled meetings, prepared reports, people waiting for decisions. Everything worked. I didn't. That same day, Ji-Yoon had flown to New York. Her agenda began immediately. Interviews, events, commitments too tightly scheduled to allow any improvisation. We didn't talk as soon as we arrived. Not out of coldness, out of understanding. In the late afternoon, my phone vibrated. A message from her. I arrived. They asked for caution. They said the moment is delicate. I read it slowly. There was no fear in the words. There was situational awareness. A few hours later, it was my turn. Here they've started too. The tone is always the same. Concern disguised as advice. The reply took a few minutes. They think they're protecting us, but deep down, they want to control the narrative. That night, we decided to call. No video, just audio. Her voice came through soft and clear, as if she were measuring every sound. It's not different here, Ji-Yoon said. They talk about image, impact, public expectations. I rested my head against the back of the office chair. Here they talk about the market, about stability, about the right moment. She took a deep breath on the other end of the line. Helena, I don't want this to turn into a war. Neither do I replied without hesitation. There was a brief silence, not uncomfortable, strategic. Then we need to be smarter than they expect, she said. I smiled to myself. Loving is going to require strategy, I murmured. She stayed silent a second longer. It will, she agreed. But it's not about hiding. I closed my eyes. It's about choosing when. We didn't say anything else for a few moments. It wasn't necessary. In New York, Ji-Yoon would remain impeccable in front of the cameras. In Cuiabá, I would keep everything running as always. In public, caution. Between us, clarity. There were no fights, no doubts. Just the awareness that loving, when excessively observed, isn't announced, it's sustained. And that night, I ended the call knowing we weren't retreating. We were simply learning how to move forward without making noise. 2 months don't change time, they change the body. When Ji-Yoon arrived at São Paulo's airport, the world was already there before me. Cameras, photographers, organized curiosity, more than I wanted. She wasn't arriving as an actress on promotion. She arrived as someone who had crossed an invisible line. Still, I went to get her. Airport security, together with my own team, guided us with almost choreographed precision. There was no chaos, but there were too many eyes. When we finally stood face to face, we didn't touch immediately. The reunion came first through the eyes, that silent recognition that needs no translation. The hug was brief, necessary, protected. We moved to another part of the airport where my plane was waiting and flew to Cuiabá. During the flight, the silence stopped being vigilant. It became intimate. Ji-Yoon observed everything with contained attention, not like a star, but like someone who understands when she is entering a territory that doesn't belong to her. It's different from what I imagined, she said, looking out the window. Brazil or my life? I asked. She smiled slightly. Both. We landed at the private airport inside our condominium, where my driver was waiting. We got into the car. Minutes later, the mansion appeared after a long path surrounded by tall trees and gardens that seemed to grow without asking permission. Nothing there was empty ostentation. It was permanence, roots, power that didn't need to announce itself. Ji-Yoon noticed immediately. When we entered, my parents were waiting for us. There was no excessive formality, no explicit tension, just contained curiosity. They didn't speak English fluently, but they said what mattered. Welcome, my mother said, with an honest smile. My father nodded, steady. It's a pleasure to meet you, Ji-Yoon replied in the same tone, respectful, present, without trying to occupy more space than what was offered. I bridged the gap. The words, the meanings. English became our shared territory, not by emotional choice, but by necessity. Even so, it worked. There was no resistance. My parents accepted, not with speeches, but with gestures. Space at the table, time, respectful silence. It wasn't loud approval, it was permission. After dinner, I led Ji-Yoon to the wing where my bedroom was, a path separate from the main house, surrounded by old trees, plants growing freely, soft lights that didn't compete with the green. It feels like another world, she murmured. It's where I breathe, I replied. The room wasn't just a space, it was a refuge. Wide windows, light wood, the distant sound of nature replacing any urban noise. Ji-Yoon entered slowly, as if learning how to step into that place. Now I understand, she said after a few seconds. What? The weight you carry. The sentence wasn't an accusation, it was perception. I stepped closer, took her hand. And I understand the risk of bringing you into this. She looked at me calmly. There was no fear, only awareness. Nothing exploded. No voices were raised. No decisions were announced. But something settled. There, among ancient trees in a house that held more history than words, we understood that this reunion wasn't only about love. It was about belonging, about exposure, about the cost of existing whole inside the other's world. And even so, we chose to stay in silence. For now, we woke up without hurry. The room still held the warmth of the night. the sheets left undone as silent proof that we hadn't slept alone, neither in body nor in intention. Ji-Yoon lay on her side, her face very close to mine, her fingers tracing slow paths along my bare arm, lingering kisses, touches without urgency, a kind of intimacy that didn't need to be described to be understood. It wasn't a loud night, it was deep, the kind in which love isn't announced, it's confirmed. "It's quieter here than I imagined," she murmured, still with her eyes closed. "Cuiabá wakes up slowly," I replied, "and so do we." She smiled, a smile that didn't belong to an actress. It belonged to someone who was, for the first time in a long while, out of scene. I took Ji-Yoon to see what never appears in interviews. An empire doesn't begin with numbers. It begins with land. We woke early. Breakfast already revealed the first cultural differences. Ji-Yoon wasn't quite sure where to start, observing everything with curiosity and care. I helped her, pointing out flavors, explaining customs, laughing softly when she tried something new. After breakfast, the plane was already prepared for departure. My father and mother went with us. During the flight, Ji-Yoon watched everything with almost childlike curiosity, asking questions in a low voice. At one point, she asked me, "Is it a farm where we're landing?" "Yes," I replied. "We have a proper runway there." When we flew over the farm, she was amazed. Cotton fields stretched as far as the eye could see, all white, continuous, Mato Grosso's white gold. She asked what crop it was, impressed by the size, by the absence of visible borders. My father explained what he could. When words failed him, I continued, translating for her. As we passed over the main house, Ji-Yoon was struck by its presence. Soon after, we began the landing procedure, descending onto a runway beside the headquarters, with the hangar at the back of the property. She watched everything in silence, absorbing it all. A house employee was already waiting for us, responsible for taking care of everything there. We got off the plane, and I showed Ji-Yoon the house. In front of it, there was an impressive lake, a large old estate, beautifully restored, luxurious without losing its history. It was imposing. Ji-Yoon was deeply impacted. This was a world she had never imagined could exist like that. I took her to the bedroom where we would stay, on the upper floor. There was a balcony with a direct view of the lake. She stood still for a few seconds, simply looking. Then we went downstairs for lunch. Once again, Ji-Yoon didn't know where to begin. It was rustic food, prepared on a wood-burning stove. I placed a little of everything on her plate. She tasted it all with attention, curiosity, respect. Some employees watched discreetly, impressed by her delicacy, her calm presence, her effortless beauty. After lunch, I showed her the farm. She was amazed by everything. We took photos in the cotton fields. As the sun began to lower, the sky of Mato Grosso opened into intense, almost unreal colors. Ji-Yoon fell silent, watching. "It's splendid," she said, as if words were insufficient. At the end of the day, we returned to the main house. My parents were already in the leisure area, talking, having drinks, waiting for the barbecue that would take place that evening. Before going to the leisure area, we went to shower. There, among the land, the open sky, and the people who had built all of that, Ji-Yoon began to understand that my world was not only power, it was origin, it was permanence, it was responsibility, and little by little, she was finding her own place within it. The shower was silent, not because intimacy was lacking, but because she was too whole to need words. The water fell slowly, warm, while Ji-Yoon kept her eyes closed, as if she were shedding layers that didn't belong to that place. I watched her without touching, not out of distance, out of respect for the moment. When she opened her eyes and found mine in the mirror's reflection, she didn't smile right away. She simply took a deep breath. "It's different," she said. "What is?" I asked. "Being here, without knowing exactly who is watching me." I stepped closer, resting my forehead against hers. "They don't observe to judge," I replied. "They observe to see if you stay." She nodded. She understood. She dressed simply, nothing that recalled a stage, nothing that asked for attention. Even so, when she came down with me to the leisure area, the effect was immediate. Night had already taken over the farm. Soft lights outlined the space. The smell of meat on the fire mixed with that of warm earth breathing after a long day. My parents were there, talking calmly, glasses in hand, restrained laughter. Employees moved naturally, the kind of presence that doesn't interrupt, it simply sustains. Ji-Yoon paused for a moment, not out of insecurity, out of reading the environment. She understood that this was not a place of spectacle, it was one of quiet belonging. "This is very alive," she murmured. "It is," I replied. "And everything here observes without invading." I presented the barbecue as if it were a ritual, not an event. She accepted with genuine curiosity, tried one cut, then another, sampled the sides. She laughed softly when she realized she didn't know where to start. "There's no order," I explained, "only choice." She raised her glass when someone offered her a caipirinha. "I hardly ever drink," she said, as if confessing something irrelevant. "Here, no one demands control," I replied. She tasted it, then another sip, then another drink. Nothing excessive, just looser, more present. My parents watched, not with suspicion, with attention. At some point my father approached. He spoke little as always. "Here, we think long-term," he said, looking at the fire. "A good decision is one that withstands time." Ji-Yoon listened carefully. Then she replied in simple, firm English, "In my life, everything is fast, but I'm learning to value what lasts." He nodded. Nothing else was said. My mother was more direct, in her own way. "Did you eat well?" she asked, lightly touching Ji-Yoon's arm. "Yes," Ji-Yoon replied, smiling. "Very well. Then you're at home," my mother concluded. It wasn't declared approval. It was practical welcome. Later, when the sky had fully darkened and the stars took their space without asking permission, Ji-Yoon stepped a little aside, looking upward. I joined her. "The sky here doesn't compete," she said. "It simply exists. That's how we learn to stay," I replied. She looked at me then, with a clarity that didn't come from alcohol or fatigue. "Helena," she began. She stopped, chose not to finish. I understood. There, that night, no one demanded definitions. No one asked for promises. No one made announcements. But something had changed. Ji-Yoon was no longer just getting to know my world. She was being seen by it. And I, for the first time, understood that loving someone like this didn't mean protecting her from the weight of my history, but trusting that she could cross it with me. The soft music continued. The fire crackled. Conversations flowed. Nothing exploded. Nothing was resolved. But it was clear, to anyone who knew how to observe, that her presence was not temporary, and that some choices, even when made in silence, can no longer be undone. The farm slowly fell asleep. Conversations faded, lights became scarce, and the sound of the night replaced everything that was human. The walk to the bedroom was silent, interrupted only by the occasional touch of our hands, not out of need for support, but for confirmation. When the door closed, the world was definitively left outside. Ji-Yoon stopped at the center of the room, as if still carrying the weight of the day on her body. The soft light traced shadows across her skin, and I knew, even before any gesture, that this night would be different from the others. There was no urgency, there was no fear, only recognition. I approached slowly. I kissed her face, then her neck, then her lips. A long, deep kiss, the kind that asks for nothing, only stays. She responded with the same silent surrender, her hands steady, her entire body present. It was intense, but not chaotic. Each movement seemed to carry the whole day with it. The land, the looks, the fire, the sky. We made love like those who sign something without needing to read it, knowing exactly what they are choosing. There were no words. There was permanence. Later, lying together, our bodies still warm, Ji-Yoon rested her head on my chest. Her fingers traced slow, distracted circles, as if she were memorizing a place. "Here," she said, almost in a whisper. "Here I can breathe without thinking about who they expect me to be." I closed my eyes. "And I replied, "can never separate who I am from what I've built. But with you, it doesn't weigh as much." She lifted her face to look at me. "Because you don't ask me to choose," she said. "You let me be." I kissed her forehead, then her hair, then I stayed there in silence. That night, I understood something that no contract, no company, no stage had ever taught me. Some people don't enter your life to change everything. They enter to stay when everything feels heavy. We fell asleep like that, without promises, without plans spoken out loud, but with the certainty, silent, definitive, that night would not be forgotten. Because it wasn't just intense, it was foundation. Morning rose slowly on the farm. The sun slipped gently through the windows, illuminating the room still wrapped in silence. Ji-Yoon woke before me. When I opened my eyes, she was sitting on the edge of the bed, observing the landscape as if trying to keep a place inside herself. "It feels like time respects people here," she said, without turning around. I smiled, still suspended between sleep and clarity. "Not always," I replied. "But today, yes. We had breakfast together on the veranda. No ceremony. Strong coffee, sliced fruit, warm bread. My parents appeared later, calm, without too many questions. There was a new naturalness among us, not because everything was resolved, but because it no longer needed to be explained. "Are you leaving now?" my mother asked. I nodded. "I need to go back to the office. Some documents won't wait." She hugged us carefully, then held Ji-Yoon's face between her hands. "Come back whenever you want," she said, in slow Portuguese, choosing each word. "This is home too." Ji-Yoon understood more through the gesture than through the language. She responded with an emotional smile and a respectful nod. My parents stayed. We left. The private plane awaited us on the runway beside the house, discreet, functional, part of my everyday life. During the flight, Ji-Yoon rested her head on my shoulder. We didn't talk much. It wasn't necessary. There was something serene about simply being there, sharing the silence. Cuiabá appeared beneath us with the familiarity of someone who never truly leaves the scene. The landing was smooth, unhurried, without alerts, without cameras. In the car, the city followed its course. People coming and going, buildings, traffic, commitments. Ji-Yoon observed everything with calm curiosity. "This is how you live," she said. "This is how I return," I replied. It was only when the car turned the final corner toward the company building that the world remembered who we were. Photographers were already waiting, not in chaotic numbers, but enough to make visible what had until then been intimate. Ji-Yoon squeezed my hand for a second, not out of fear, but alignment. We stepped out together, without hurry, without detours. The cameras recorded, the flashes went off, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a threat. It was simply consequence. Inside the building, the doors opened. Reserved greetings, looks that asked without daring to ask. Ji-Yoon walked beside me with a silent, steady presence. Not as a guest, not as a star, as a choice. While I signed documents, she waited seated in a nearby armchair, flipping through an old magazine about Brazilian agribusiness, as if she wanted to understand every part of that world. During a brief pause, our eyes met. We didn't smile, we didn't gesture, but everything was there. Love not as spectacle, love as everyday life, visible, sustained. And on that ordinary day, among papers, flashes, and decisions, I understood that perhaps this was the most revolutionary thing of all, to continue. Routine returned with the same firmness it always had. After that day at the office, it became clear that pretending normality made no sense. But there was also no room for dramatization. Ji-Yoon had commitments. I had decisions. Love would have to learn how to exist between schedules. Paris came first. At the airport, there was no scene. There was no need. Ji-Yoon held my face between her hands for a moment longer than what was allowed in public. "Don't disappear," she said, in a low voice. "I won't," I replied. "I'll just be in another time zone." She smiled in that restrained way I already knew well. "I'll be back in a week. Then, Korea." I nodded. We both knew what that meant. The farewell was a brief, precise kiss, enough to remind us that it wasn't an ending, it was an interval. Paris reached me through messages sent at dawn, photos of hotel windows, short voice notes recorded between one commitment and another. Ji-Yoon never complained. She simply shared small details, as if saying, "I'm still here." When she left for Korea, silence took on a different weight. Not because of lack of contact, we spoke every day, but because now what separated us wasn't only distance, it was history, culture, expectation. "My parents are reserved," she warned me during a long call. "Already night for me. Don't expect enthusiasm." "I don't," I replied. "Just honesty." She took a deep breath before hanging up. "Then you'll be fine." A week later, I was the one crossing oceans. Korea welcomed me with precision and discretion. Everything worked. Everything had its place. The driver didn't talk much. The ride was silent. Ji-Yoon waited for me at the entrance of her parents' building. No makeup, no styling, no character. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I would have come anyway," I replied. The house was elegant but restrained. Nothing excessive, nothing improvised. Ji-Yoon's parents were waiting for us in the living room. They stood when we entered. There were no hugs. There were slight bows, respect. They didn't speak Portuguese. My Korean was non-existent. English there was neutral ground, used carefully. "Welcome," her mother said in a calm tone. Her father observed more than he spoke. He evaluated, not with aggressive suspicion, but with deep attention. We sat. Tea was served. The questions came slowly. What I did, where I came from, what I intended. They didn't ask if we loved each other. They asked how we would live. Ji-Yoon spoke little. She let me answer, not as a test, but as a choice. "I didn't come to take your daughter out of her world," I said calmly. "I came to learn how to exist in it, together." The silence that followed was long. Ji-Yoon's mother was the first to smile. Small, contained, but real. "That is enough," she said. There was no declaration, no explicit approval. There was something harder to earn, acceptance, without spectacle. That night when we were alone, Ji-Yoon rested her forehead against mine, exhausted. "You were perfect," she murmured. "No," I replied. I was honest. She closed her eyes, relieved. "Then maybe this will work." Distance would continue to exist. Schedules would continue to demand. Worlds would not merge all at once. But there, between Paris, Cuiabá, and Seoul, we learned something essential. It wasn't proximity that sustained us. It was the daily decision to cross whatever was necessary, without disappearing. I stayed in Seoul for a week, not as someone on an official visit, but as someone who chose to stay. I came to know Ji-Yoon's home through silence, through precise schedules, through meals where little was said, but everything was observed. Her mother offered me tea more often than words. Her father asked short, direct questions, always looking me in the eyes, not to test me, but to understand. At the farewell, Ji-Yoon's mother held my hands gently. "Love requires courage," she said, in careful English. "You both have it." I returned to Brazil with that sentence accompanying me. 2 months later, the farm was in a state of quiet anticipation. There were no announcements, no early headlines, no invitation to the world. The ceremony took place in the late afternoon, near the lake. Golden light touched the water softly. Light wood, white flowers, chairs arranged without excess. Everything seemed to breathe along with the place. My parents were there. Ji-Yoon's parents were there too. Few friends, few words, much presence. I was already in position when the music began. Piano, violin, live, slow, precise, and then Ji-Yoon entered. She entered beside her father. The dress was simple and impeccable, elegant without asking for attention, firm without rigidity. Each step she took seemed conscious, not heavy. Her father walked with serene dignity, like someone who gives, but does not lose. When our eyes met, the entire world rearranged itself. I didn't think about schedules. I didn't think about risks. I didn't think about what we had to face to be there. I thought only, this is it. The ceremony was brief. No long speeches, no exaggerated symbols. When we exchanged vows, we spoke softly, so that the world wouldn't be bigger than us. And when the rings touched our hands, I felt that everything that had begun in Monaco, in silence, in chance, in fear, had finally found rest. Later, there was dinner under soft light, contained laughter, conversations that didn't need explanation. Later still, we walked together to the lake. The water reflected the dark sky, calm, whole. Ji-Yoon held my hand firmly. It wasn't easy, she said. No, I replied. But it was true, she smiled. Not as an actress, not as an image, but as a woman who chose. And there, where the land sustained everything we had been and everything we would be, I understood something simple and definitive. Love doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be chosen, every day, and we chose.